Hi, my name is Steve Larson. In this video, I'm going to talk through the first movement of the Telemann Viola Concerto in G major and discuss some of the musical ideas and some of the reasons for bowing and fingering choices that I make. In a different video, I'll do more playing and practicing and maybe a full performance, but this is going to be kind of explanatory. So the movement is Largo, which means slow, but it's in 3/2, the time signature. So that means 3 half note beats per measure. So you want to actually count this in half notes as your main pulse, not excessively slow by counting slow quarter notes. So a good tempo for this movement is about 56 to the half note. About ta ta da 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 dum. Another aspect of the rhythm in this is there's a lot of dotted quarter and eighth note rhythms. So that ends up coming out with some players as almost triplety. Which is not how you're supposed to play it. It's got to be a real dotted rhythm. So the dotted quarter has to be long enough and the eighth note has to be fast enough that it sounds. If I play the subdivisions, you'll hear. Those are playing the eighth notes. So. Okay. And then at a slightly faster tempo. I can think about the eighth note subdivisions before I start. Okay. You may have noticed sometimes I start in first position. That's obviously very simple. Use your fourth finger on the D and make sure you vibrate. Practice your fourth finger vibrato, everybody. But sometimes I go to the trouble of starting in second position. Find that B with my first finger, and then I get to my third finger for that first long note, and that's my best vibrato. So better than my fourth finger for sure. So down to first position using the open G in the next measure. The bowing works out beautifully if you just start down bow and do the printed bowing. By the way, I'm working off the Suzuki Volume 4 edition, which is what a lot of students first play this piece using. So I change a number of things that are in here, and I'm going to explain why I make those choices and what the different challenges are with different bowings and different fingerings. So the next phrase, for instance, a lot of people just start it down bow, which is a very simple way to start. I actually have chosen to start it up bow, and now I'm going to explain why by talking about some other musical content in the piece. If you look at measures 17 and 18, that is the end of the first long phrase. Those two measures have a total of 6 half note beats in them. Musically speaking, that is an example of what's called hemiola, where instead of feeling it as 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, which is the normal way to do it, you actually have to emphasize every 2 beats. So for those 2 measures, 17 and 18, you want to feel it as if it's not just 2 measures of 3 half notes per bar, but 3 measures of 2 half notes per bar. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And I'll play that for you. So this is the measure 17. And I know that that is right because of what's going on in the harmony in the piano part or the orchestral accompaniment. It also sounds right melodically. You arrive on that really emphasized trill, and it's actually a downbeat if I'm counting in 2 beats groups. And it's also a very, very common way to finish a phrase in music from the time period when this was written. Telemann lived in the late 1600s, early 1700s, and he was very common if you were in a time signature that was 3/4 or 3/2, that you would finish the phrase by taking the last two measures before the last chord and making it feel like it's swinging in 2-beat groups instead of 3-beat groups. So if I play from one measure before that, this is measure 16, I'll count to 3, but then you'll notice when I get to measure 17, I start emphasizing every 2 beats. 1, 2, 3. And you're going to see the same thing a bunch of other times in this movement. If you look at measure 28, that is the end of the next phrase, and that also works, emphasizing every 2 beats. If you look at measure 42, same thing, emphasize every 2 beats. Okay, I didn't go on after that one. Measure 46, even though you don't play the downbeat, the orchestra gives a strong downbeat, and those 2 bars are emphasized the same way. So I'll count to 3, and then I'll say 1 strong, then I'll come in leading to the 3rd beat, which is actually a strong beat in this case. 1, 2, 3, 1. Okay, and the last time it comes, if you're using the Suzuki edition, then it has the last phrase of the piece is actually written out in your part, even though that's not actually part of the solo viola part. The Suzuki edition gives you something to play along with the orchestra, even while they're finishing after the official solo has finished. So if you look at measure 52, 3, 4, 5, measure 55, another one of those 2 bars of 3 beats that's musically supposed to be grouped every 2 beats. Coming in right on measure 55. And I was doing that fairly obviously. It doesn't have to be done quite so obviously. That's a matter of taste. You can emphasize those every 2 beats really obviously or kind of subtly, let people kind of guess. It can be a little bit mysterious. It doesn't have to be something you hit people over the head with. So now going back to my bowing choice near the beginning, measure 13, how do I start that phrase? Well, when I want to get to measure 17, that's the beginning of something where I have to emphasize every 2nd beat. I want to start down bow because I want to be down bow on the beats I'm emphasizing. Good. And again, if you're looking at the Suzuki edition, measure 18, you'll notice that there's actually a slur from the trilled dotted half note. I'm not doing that trill. Telemann didn't write it. It's not really stylistically correct to slur it. So if you like my bowings and if you like that rhythmic emphasis I'm talking about, you definitely don't want to do that trill. You should be down bow on the trill and then up on the quarter note afterwards and finish down bow. So since I want to arrive down bow in measure 17, I have to be up bow at the beginning of measure 16. So that's the C sharp. Okay. Now, suppose I could break some of the slurs, those dotted rhythm slurs, but that would stick out. Telemann wrote all of those dotted rhythm slurs in, and if you break one randomly in the middle of a phrase, it'll stick out. It's not really a great choice. You could start down bow at measure 13. Go to the tip, save a little bit, then just take another up bow. And there you go, you arrive on measure 17 down bow. That's a tiny bit complicated. It works absolutely fine. So that was starting down bow at 13. Make sure this one you go to the tip, save, just stop the bow for a split second, another up bow. Okay, since that's a little bit complicated, it feels a little freer. I don't have to think so much. I just get to sing and play. If I start up bow at measure 13, down bow at measure 17, and I didn't have to do anything really fancy in the middle of the phrase. Whether you start down bow or up bow, the shape of that melodic material you're playing, which is the same as the beginning material has a rising 3 notes and then a big drop to a lower note. That idea comes over and over again. Because it repeats several times in a row in many phrases, sometimes you have to play it starting down bow, and then right away you have to play it starting up bow. So you have to be good at shaping that little musical idea, whether you start down bow or up bow. Measure 13, it's a little simpler to start down bow, but you have 2 full beats of rest before it. It's not that hard to get to the tip. Put your bow in the right spot, breathe. But if you really prefer to start down bow, you just do the thing where and it works out fine. If you really don't want to do either of those bowing choices, you could split one of the slurs, just make sure it doesn't stick out very much. You could end up doing everything backwards. You could end up down bow at 16. And then you're up bow at measure 17, but you can still make it work. And then you would do that slur in measure 18 at the end of the bar. So my personal choice, just start up bow at measure 13, works out really simply, but do what you think makes the most sense for how it feels with your technique and your bow arm and all that. Okay, fingering wise, I do what's in the Suzuki edition at the beginning of measure 13, start in 3rd position, shift down. A hint of a slide is fine. You want to really connect melodically. You just don't want a big slurp. Too much. There's a little slide. That's totally acceptable as long as it's tasteful and you do that by having your fingers light and just timing things properly with the bow. After that, stay in 1st position. Here, you can use your 4th finger, a low 4 instead of a high 3 on the C sharp, then 1-4. That works fine. Or if you prefer, you could do, just as you're crossing strings, you move your 3rd finger over the string and up a half step. If you do it well, it can be just as smooth. You don't want it absolutely connected there anyway, probably. The C sharp is kind of the beginning of something, so if there's a hint of a little space where you kind of enunciate that C sharp, that's great. So you can do either fingering, they both work fine. It's just a personal preference. Moving on to the next phrase, measure 22. So the next phrase, printed to start mezzo forte. Now, none of these dynamics that are in here are telamons, but they're generally good ideas. So I do a lot of them. I tweak them a little bit. You may have heard me doing something slightly different in the first first couple lines, but I'm not going to go back and talk about that. Here, starting mezzo forte, then probably build as you go up in register. A little stronger. Strongest here, but you're going over to the A string. Make sure it doesn't do that. Be nice, okay? So, good bow arm and flexible fingers, shock absorbers. Oh, wrong note. It's gonna be loud on the A string. You just have to make it sound beautiful. Okay. So fingering wise, I like the beginning. You could start in first position. You end up having to use a 4 on the first half note. It's not my best vibrato. And I got to go to third position a split second later. So if I start in second position, I'm almost in third position. So I just find a 1 on that F sharp. I still use the open D to get to third position. Works fine either way. If you prefer just to start in first position, no problem at all. Going to third position, down to first position, and again, you can slide a little bit, but not too much. So I like that fingering that's in the Suzuki edition where you use fourth finger at the end of the line, the end of measure 24. Now you got to reach back with your first finger to get that D sharp, and no slide, please. Now reach back up to it, regular high 2, and then move your 1 up to the E. After that, when your 2 goes down for the next B, you want to block a fifth, meaning your finger's going to be touching 2 strings. So you can just play without having to pick up your second finger. All right, so then in measure 25 in the Suzuki edition, the second beat is marked as separate bows. That's not Telamann's articulation. He didn't write that. And actually, because I want to be down bow at measure 28, I put that slur back in. So I slur all of the half note beats in 25. I do one bow per beat. So I slur that second beat. And then I do the printed bowing in measure 27, which is down bow for 1 beat, up bow for 2 beats. And then I arrive down bow on measure 28, which is what I want to be able to emphasize the strong beats, which are every 2 beats. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, if I counted 3, just to confuse you. Okay, so measure 25, that's going to be a down bow. Slur. Arriving down bow on 27. So, and then I mentioned already that in measure 25, here you want to land your second finger touching the 2 middle strings so that you play the B and can play the next note without having to pick up your B. Now here, you want to have the 1 also touching 2 strings because you have that coming up. So that's called blocking fifths, when your finger is touching 2 adjacent strings. You're not actually going to play them as double stops, but you're going to want to be able to get smoothly from one string to the next without picking up your finger. So there's a little bit of that going on in measure 25 for the second finger and in measure 26 for the first finger. Just staying in first position after that. When you get the figure at measure 28, that has the E, G sharp, and then a D natural. You may have noticed I play a 4th finger on the G sharp, so a low 4 instead of a high 3. Okay, that's a very, very common pattern you're going to see that happens to be what's called a dominant 7th chord or a major 3rd and minor 7th chord. This is a major 3rd. It's 2 whole steps from 1 to what would be high 3. And then that's the minor 7th. Okay, you're going to see that all over the place in music, of all different periods, very common. I usually use this kind of fingering unless there's some particular reason to want to be on my third finger and vibrate a lot. But this is only an eighth note. I don't need to go that beyond there for very long. So, okay, that's better. Fits better in the hand. Also, there's a low 2 right after. So using the low 4 on the G sharp instead of a high 3 is a better choice. After that, staying in first position, using the open string to shift to third position to finish. But what you don't want to do is use your open string and then a ginormous vibrato on the fingered 2, because that would stick out and sound unstylistic. So you just use a little bit of vibrato on the finishing note. Something tasteful. Okay. So I'll play that whole phrase so you see all the pieces put together. This is starting in measure 22. I'm starting on the second beat where it says mezzo forte in the Suzuki edition. I'm going to start in second position, then go down, use an open, and then go to third position. And you'll see I do the slur in measure 25, block my fifths in 25 and 26, use my 4 on the G sharp in measure 28, and hopefully it will all work out well. 2, 3, 1. Next phrase. So here we go. It's marked in the Suzuki edition to start down bow in measure 34 on the second beat. Okay, so some of that works comfortably, some of it is a little uncomfortable. So I'll show you where and why. If I start down bow, I have to cross to a lower string when I'm in the upper half, crossing to an up bow. Now it's a single string crossing. It's not difficult there. So that's a very minor concern. It's not worth changing the bowing just for that. So. Now I'm doing a double string crossing to a higher string near the frog. That's hard to control. You can control it, but it is awkward. It's a lot easier if I arrive down bow at 36. And notice that goes to a lower string. It's a double string crossing to a lower string near the frog is easier. Double string crossing to a higher string, easier in the upper half. Now that's a little tricky because you're crossing to the A string and you might squawk. Right? Okay, so that spot, if you change the bowing, you've got to be really, really conscious of your tone quality there. That would be easier down bow. Okay, but then I look ahead also and I see I want to be down bow at measure 42, where there's that finishing pattern of having to emphasize the first beat of every 2 beats, starting in measure 42. Okay, so I definitely want to be down bow at 42. Backing up, I have to be up bow at measure 41. So I kind of want to be up bow in measure 40 on the second beat. Now, I have to be really careful on the tone quality when I cross to a down bow on the A string, but I really, really want to be up bow in measure 41, so I can be down bow in measure 42. So for me, I've decided that the compromise, one way or the other, the best solution for me is to start up bow way back at measure 34, and then it all works out very simply, as long as I'm careful when I'm crossing to the A string about my tone quality. So starting in measure 34, 1. Okay, so that is how I do that. The dynamics that are in there are nice ideas. They're not Telamann's ideas. Telemann and most composers before about 1800, in a concerto solo part, you don't see any dynamics at all. They weren't going to tell the soloist what to do. In a lot of cases, they were going to be the soloist, so they knew what they were going to do. You can do what's printed in the Suzuki part, which is a nice contrast, a little stronger on the top, and a little softer. Back to being a little stronger. Then it says dolce, which means sweetly. Then poco a poco crescendo, little by little crescendo, getting louder. And those are all really good ideas. So you can certainly do those or come up with your own dynamics that you think work better. If you start down bow at 34, it works out fine. You just have to control that nicely with good fingers and bow arm motion. Then you're on easy street here, because then you get the up bow on the high note. Easy. And you can do my little trick where if you're down bow in measure 40, just take another up bow. Okay, or play it backwards if you want. Yeah. So there's always different options. At measure 43, measure 43, that last slur is actually not Telamann's when you do the E octave. So you don't actually have to worry about being 100% smooth there. You can actually put a little articulation there. Telemann just wrote the dotted rhythm, probably intending it to be a hooked bowing. So if you want to do that, so that's probably what Telemann wanted, but you can connect it also. So now there's a fermata over that note, means you can hold it a little extra long and let it ring a little bit. Take your time, and then it says cadenza, which is a decoration that traditionally would be improvised, but it's written out in a lot of editions. It doesn't have to be a big deal, although in some later pieces, they turn into huge long things that last for a page or two. In this case, it's only a collection of about 8 or 9 notes. And a cadenza is a decoration between a point of high tension harmonically and a resolution. And in this case, you've just done this thing. That chord is actually unresolved, it's it actually is a dominant 7th chord if you want to talk about the harmony, but you don't necessarily need to know that. Just understand that there's a lot of built-in tension, and everybody's expecting it to resolve to something. In this case, it'll be back to the G major chord, because we're in G major, and this is actually finishing the piece. Everything after this point is just kind of celebration that we finally got back to G major, and we're done. So there's a point of high tension. You decorate a little bit, improvising something. In this case, it's written out for you. And then there's a resolution. And the resolution is the orchestra coming in on the downbeat of measure 46. And that cadenza is played freely. So you play the fermata note. And you can treat that last half note as if it also has a fermata. So it can be longer. You can just stay there, and or it can be fairly close to what's printed. And then you have to imagine the orchestra. 1. And you're going to notice in measure 45, where the cadenza is written, the notes in the cadenza, it's a D, it's an F sharp, which would maybe normally be a high 3, F sharp, then A, then C natural. Okay, I use the low 4 again on the high instead of using a high 3. So low 4, then the 1, then the low 3. Open D. Then I use a low 3 on the F sharp as printed in the Suzuki edition. You try and hold that on the string while you play the open A. And then you tuck your second finger up underneath the 3. And that works fine. After that, there is a bowing mark to start down bow. If you do that, that's totally fine. You'd want to be in the upper half. So if you do, while the orchestra gives that downbeat, 1, place your bow in the upper half to start down bow, so that you have lots of bow for the next up bow. But then don't do that bowing that I just did. You would do what's printed. Because you definitely want to be down bow on the trill in measure 47, second beat of 47. I think there's a little discrepancy as to what the bowing is that Telemann wanted in measure 46. At the end of the bar, he may have wanted this bowing, but it's not certain. I think the manuscript is unclear. If I remember what I saw in there, I have to go back and look. You should go look. It's easy to find. Everything's easy to find nowadays on the internet. It's amazing. So what I've decided to do is I like to start down bows in the lower half after the rest. 1. Now I'm backwards. I don't want to be up bow on that trill. So I do what I thought I saw a license to do in the manuscript, which is this. Okay, that's starting up bow in the lower half. 1. Quarter note up bow. 2/8 notes down bow. Up bow and slur. Okay, so that comes out like this. 1. Okay. Going on, it's marked from the second beat of 48. It says tutti over top of that. That's actually telling you that the actual solo part of the concerto for this movement is done, and everything that's afterwards would just normally be the orchestra and you not playing, or you as the soloist just playing along as one of the voices in the orchestra. And so what you've got there is actually the melody that the first violins have, but printed an octave lower so that it's more manageable on viola. So, and it's quite possible that the violin section would be starting down bow. So if you're playing along with an orchestra, you might end up doing a retake to try and be with the violins. So you would have to do... that puts a break that I don't particularly love, and I think most of the time you're going to be playing with this piano. If you wanted to just start upbow, that works fine too. So I do the bowings and fingerings that are printed in the Suzuki edition, where I start where it says tutti. I start I start upbow, but in first position, third position, first position, to third position for the B, staying in third position, down bow. A little replacement fingering, but on the next string over with third finger on the D, second position. Move my 2 over to the C. Now in this edition they say replace that second finger on the second beat with a 3. And that's totally fine. That's a good fingering. I actually, because I have to do the down, up, up, I actually kind of like doing the replacement fingering during the up, up. It gives me a little bit of enunciation, so I don't need to do so much enunciation with the bow. So I do this. So I just have subtly changed what's in the Suzuki edition. It sounds better and feels better in my hand. That's about it. Those are the main considerations for bowing choices. That little rhythmic thing that I talked about, where the two bars of 3 beats have to be played as if it's 3 bars of 2 beats, such as measure 17, measure 28, etc., etc. All those spots. When that happens, when you change from a 3-time signature to a 2, that's a type of 3 against 2 that's called hemiola. And there are other kinds of hemiola, but this is one example of hemiola when you have a 3 to 2 relationship like that. And it's useful to understand that as you start the movement, so that you understand why we want to be emphasizing beats and picking bowings the way we did. All right. I'll try and get another video made soon of a complete run through of this thing, so you can watch it without all the chit chat. Thanks for watching.